Okay, committee, the decision has been made to go ahead and get started. We have one member that's on two conference committees that are meeting at the same time, and we'll just fill her in on what we've done. So to start with, I want to start with the aviation tax credit. That's House Bill 2464. And you guys made some changes to it. We would like to, the House would like to change the sunset back to 5 years from 3. And we would also like to add the language from HB 2466, that's the angel investor tax credit. We'd like to add the language for that into 2464 and also extend the sunset to the 5 years from the 3 that you'd made the change to.
Chairman, we'll let us have a little conference. We'll be right back.
Okay. Senator Owens?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we're amenable to that with one addition. In our version of 2466, there is a carve out where 25% of those funds will be focused on rural areas in Kansas, and I believe it gave a date of December 10th. We'd like to leave that there, but move it to October 1st. Now, understand what that means is that from the beginning of the fiscal year to October 1st, 25% is prioritized in that area. But after that deadline, it can still be used in rural areas, but then it becomes open to all areas again. And so that's the only requested change I would have to 2466 is moving it from December 10th to October 1st at the request of Commerce.
And you're okay with the 5-year sunset for both bills? Okay. We have 2 out of 3 that, and we'll accept that change.
Very good. I also wanted to confirm, was just brought to my attention by the revisor. In the aviation tax credit bill, there is also Cedar Crest and Eisenhower, I believe you guys put in there. Are you wanting to move those to 5 years as well, or leave those at 3 years? That was a question from the revisor.
I believe that I thought the Senate might have added those and on the floor. And we'd be fine with changing that back to 5 years too, the whole, all the tax credits.
Yeah. We're good with that as well.
Okay, any other suggestions or changes to House Bill 2464? All right, so on House Bill 2464, could we get a recap of what we are going to agree to?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So House Bill number 2464, as amended by Senate Committee of the Whole, would extend the aviation tax credit program for an additional 5 years instead of 3. The Eisenhower Foundation and the Friends of Cedar Crest Association tax credit would also be extended to 5 years instead of 3. On the second page, or actually, and then you would also include the contents of House Bill 2466 as amended by Senate Committee, which was the angel investor tax credit. It, instead of a 3-year sunset, it would also go to a 5-year sunset. And the December 10th deadline regarding rural communities would be changed to December 1st. Oh, sorry, October 1st. That's what I wrote down. Sorry, October 1st. And I believe that is everything.
No question. Could you
Senator
confirm-
Alley, sorry.
Thank you. Could you confirm that the 25% tax credit set aside is in there?
Yes, my understanding of the agreement is that it's using the contents of House Bill 2466 as amended by Senate Committee, except that there will be a change extending 3 years to 5 years. So it'd be, instead of 2029, it'll be 2031. And the 25% provision remains, except that instead of December 10th, it will read October 1st.
Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Need to use yours. So with that Senate addition, what defines a rural community? Is this a municipality? Is it a county? And what is the definition of rural underneath this, please?
We defined that, and I think, Amelia, could you help us with that definition?
Certainly. Mr. Chair, the provision that was added to this tax credit provides that for tax year 2027 and thereafter, that at least 25% of the tax credits that can be allowed each year shall be utilized for investors that invest in qualified Kansas businesses located in counties with a population of 50,000 or fewer. And then the provision goes on to say that that provision applies if there are enough applications to fulfill that. If there are not enough applications on or before now October 1st, those tax credits would become available to anyone who qualifies under the program without the kind of the business restriction.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're in agreement on 2466, or 64, sorry. I believe we're still waiting on some amendments to come up from the revisor's office, so, but I bring up H Bill 2481. And that is the bill that was sent over to the Senate. Started out as a transient guest tax bill. We left the underlying language alone and made it so that local authorities could not stand in the way of the number of Airbnbs being during the World Cup period only. They still got the right to license them and regulate them, but they had to give them a license without regard to a limitation. You guys made a change in it that added transient guest tax back to just 1 bedroom or more. And we would like to put that back as to the House version, which was 3 or more bedrooms for transient guest tax, which is current law. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll certainly consider that. I know one of the things that we would like for you to consider is the addition of the contents of Senate Bill 393 into 2481. That had to do with 393 is the 23-hour alcohol sales. And what that does is that allows counties or cities to opt in. Originally introduced, it was an opt-out language. We changed it to where if those counties specifically in those areas where the World Cup would like to sell alcohol for an extra 3 hours, they would have the ability to do so. That did pass our chamber. And again, that's now an opt-in, so we would give the cities and counties the ability to opt in to allowing that to occur.
Okay, so I'm familiar with that concept. We did have some people on the House side, especially in the rural areas that wouldn't be affected by World Cup, and they had some concerns that this would allow everybody in the entire state to do this. And you're saying you made a change to the concept, and that would be each city has to opt in?
That is correct. The original language of the bill had the entire state participating. And to not participate, you would actually, the county or the city would have to opt out. We changed it to where the entire state could still participate, but that city or county or municipality had to now opt in via a resolution by that community. So it puts it back in local control's decision.
Stand by. Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a deadline for these municipalities? What is opting? So they just do a resolution. It just has to be when?
You go say.
The provisions of Senate Bill 393, as amended by Senate Committee, don't have a specific deadline that's specific, but it does require the adoption of a resolution or ordinance by the city or county to participate, and that such ordinance or resolution be provided by the clerk of such city or county to the Director of Alcoholic Beverage Control. And this provision is limited in time. It commences June 11th of 2026 and ends, it goes through July 19th of 2026.
So theoretically, if they got that resolution to whoever needed it by June 10th, they're good? I mean, hopefully they would be able to get that done prior, but just needed to know that. Thank you.
Senator Alley.
With that, the local control was the most important part for that. I want to make sure that the outer counties, I'm going to use Elkhart as an example, they probably won't participate in the activity, but they don't have to do anything if they don't want to participate. If you do want to participate, you do have to do something. So that's the reason for the thought process.
Okay, stand by. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the transient guest tax, is current law 2 rooms or more? Or is it current law more than 2 rooms?
I believe it's more than 2 rooms, but
Let's get clarification.
it's in a couple of different places.
So with respect to the definition, with respect to the definitions of hotel, motel, or tourist court, currently the current statute provides that it's having more than 2, having more than 2 bedrooms furnished for the accommodation of such guests. And then accommodations broker is, it looks like also is 2 or more rooms in a location. The language, yeah, so it having, a little hard to read the way this is. So the hotel motel tourist court currently is having more than 2 bedrooms furnished. And I believe the House version as amended by House Committee was just well, the original bill changed it to one or more, and then the House version went to more than two. So it's just depending on how you word it, two or, two or more than two.
Amelia, could you also confirm that time frame that is that just during the World Cup or is that forever?
Part of the bill, House Bill 2481, the new Section 1 applies to kind of the World Cup time of this summer and has some change, has a slight change in definition of transient guest for that time period. The definitions with respect to the number of bedrooms only apply, or actually applies, it's merely it is a statutory change to the transient guest tax without a limitation on time. So that it is not limited by time. It is just a change. The current version is a change. So that's not limited to just the World Cup time.
Could you tell us what it was prior to the change as far as the number of rooms, bedrooms?
Looking at the bill, it appears that hotel, motel, or tourist court, current language is includes having more than 2 bedrooms furnished for guests. The current version of the bill as amended by Senate committee changes that to 1 or more. I believe the offer from the House, and the chair can correct me if I'm wrong, is to simply go back to the more than 2 language. So there's essentially, I mean, it would seem that, you know, the more than 2 would go back to the original. The part that does change, though, is that I believe, oh, no, it goes, accommodation broker would also go back to the original. Well, it currently reads 2 or more, and it would go back, it would be reworded slightly, more than 2.
So the intent was to make that uniform because it was 2 different ways in the code. And so we went back to the original intent. My committee had a problem with the original bill because they viewed it as a tax on small businesses. And whether the guest pays it or not, it still affects the final price of the rental, and it would come out of the owner's pocket. So there was no way we were going to be able to pass that bill out of the House Commerce Committee.
Would there be any, again, I realize the language as it exists now is a little bit convoluted in statute. Would there be anything gained on somewhat of meeting in the middle and saying 2 or more?
Can't accept that because that would be an increase on Airbnbs. Right now, the 2 bedrooms don't have to collect transient guest tax, and that's a burdensome regulation on the industry.
Chairman, I think that language clarification from Amelia was helpful, and we will accept your more than 2. It's more than 2, I think is what you have in there, right?
Amelia, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I believe the House offer was their language, which was more than two in both the definition of hotel, motel, tourist court, and accommodations broker, that the language would read more than two.
If you accept, we'll accept it more than two if you accept our alcohol language.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your indulgence. It is my understanding that current law is two or more. The House position is more than two. Those are, I just want to make sure that because they're not exactly the same thing, just for point of clarification.
Melia, one more time. The current language is more than two, correct?
The current language, the current law relating to definition of hotel, motel, or tourist court that incorporates that they need to collect transient guest tax is more than two. The House offer would be to return that to more than two. However, there's also a definition of accommodations broker, and this may be where there's some inconsistency in the current law, where accommodation broker currently reads two or more, and the House version was more than two rooms for accommodation broker. So that is it's standardizing those two there, so they are both two or more.
They're both more than two. Yes, okay, all right, yeah.
I said it wrong. They're both
Holy
more than two.
Yeah. Picked the wrong day to stop drinking coffee. All right. Oh, we're good with that, if you're good with that. Okay. Might I ask for a recap on what we agreed to? Just.
So as a recap, Mr. Chair and committee, this would be for House Bill number 2481 as amended by Senate committee. The change would be back to the House Committee of the Whole version, is that correct? That would provide, that would change the definitions of accommodation broker to more than two rooms. And actually, there would be then no change in the definition of hotel, motel, tourist court from current law, because it would still read more than two. And then also the contents of Senate Bill 393 as amended by Senate committee relating to the alcohol sales during the FIFA World Cup would be included in 2481.
Okay, thank you very much. Stand by. All right, it looks like the revisor's office is here with amendments for the next discussion. I want to bring back up the discussion on House Bill 2466. And the House offer is to remove the contents of 2466 and insert the contents of Senate Bill 197 as amended by the House. And I have some amendments on that language to hand out. Senator Alley.
So this is, that is a shell, HB, now it becomes a shell 2466. You're putting in SB 197 as it is today. And then you're going to offer some amendments to that. Is that correct?
That is correct. And this is the Star Bond bill as passed by the House. Okay, so while you're reviewing that, I can explain it. Do you want to take a minute to review it, or you want me just to kind of walk through it? Okay, so as you know, the Senate made several changes to the Star Bond bill, came over to the House. House made several more changes. Some of them are redundant. Some of them were in conflict with each other, and some of them made it difficult to understand what the intent was. And so most of the balloon amendment that we're talking about today is to kind of clean up that language and pair it up. And to address a couple of issues with the large Star Bond district or the appearance of a large Star Bond district in the sports authority that the term sheet that the state has with Kansas City Chiefs. So the first part of this amendment addresses that concern on the way that the Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of Commerce, drew the Star Bond district for the Kansas City Chiefs on the state portion. That map that was put out was for informational purposes only, and it'll change as we find out where the stadiums are going to be built for sure. And the bond district will be reduced in size. But the concern is on the underlining Star Bond bill, when you have a Star Bond district drawn by the local authorities, they can't put a new Star Bond district in that district when it expires for the life of the area. We want to make sure that it's clear that that only applies to the local area that has pledged their local increment. And so, for example, in Wyandotte County, when they drew their district, they drew it in a field right now with no retail. And so that district would be drawn, or is drawn by them, and they wouldn't be able to put a new Star Bond district there when it pays off. But their concern is that if we drew a larger Star Bond district and all the cities in between, Olathe also, that the state's portion of the Star Bond district, when it pays off, they want to be able to make sure that we're not prohibiting them from building another Star Bond district in the state area. And so that's the first part of the amendment. And moving on, any questions on that? Just explain it in general. The revisers could point out to Charles. Could you tell us what page that part is on? Microphone, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe what you were specifically just referencing would be on page 10 of the balloon.
Mr. Chairman, once they define that district and the bonds were paid off within that district, the way it's written now, they could not apply for another. Is that correct?
So it's unclear because the original Star Bond language was for the cities producing a Star Bond district, and the intent is not to change that. The intent is to make sure that the state's portion that was created by the special session Star Bond bill that we did for the professional sports teams wasn't punitive to the local areas, especially the ones that don't have a project in their area. They could not use that area currently until the Star Bonds are paid off. And once they are, they want to be able to build their own Star Bond project if they need to.
What is the base? What's the base at that time when the Star Bonds pays off? Does that establish a new base?
It'd be a new Star Bond district.
So the new base would be established by the end of that time.
New base. So there was some, in the star bond, the underlying star bond bill, there was some imprecise and undefined language in a few places described where the area of the revenues can be pledged. And it's cleaner to use a project area, which is a defined term in the star bond bill. So the second portion of the amendment will clarify that what a star bond area is. Doesn't change the district, it just makes it clear where the tax can be pledged. And Charles, can you tell us where that might be?
Thank you, Chairman. So there are, I think, more than one reference to star bond project areas. I think at least two. One of them you can find on page 11 of the balloon.
Stand by. All right, so Revisor Reimer, there's several places that this is referenced in the star bond area. In previous, where it used to say the star bond project, but the intent has always been for the sales tax to be pledged in the whole district, not just at the project. And so this language was pointed out by the Department of Commerce that it needed to be cleaned up and clarified. And Charles, if you want to point out the other areas that this language was corrected.
So another area would be page 23 of the balloon. And additional references the committee can find on page 24 of the balloon. And Chairman, if I may, I would just point out that star bond project area is a defined term, and the definition for that is on page 9 of the balloon.
Okay, thank you. So, this star bond bill has progressed for the last 25 years, and as we make changes to it, we use different terms. This kind of clarifies the entire bill and uses a uniform term and one that's defined. Next change is also from the Department of Commerce, I believe, and it was clarify the star bond capture period. On a normal star bond is 20 years, and on I guess the Raceway it was 25, and on the Kansas City Chiefs it's 30. But it says the maximum star bond, currently it says the maximum star bond maturity is 20 to 30 years, but doesn't define the length of time revenues can be captured. This closes the loop on that, so we want to make sure that we don't go beyond 20 years or beyond 30 years. Once you hit your time limit, there are no more payments made. And Charles, you want to point out where those might be in the bill?
Thank you, Chairman. So those would be on page 15 of the balloon.
Representative Clayton with a question.
Thank you. This question is actually about the previous thing where we were talking about that definition of star bond area. But I see on page 24, there's this collected from taxpayers doing business outside boundaries of the star bond project district. Are star bond area and star bond project district the same thing?
Revisor Reimer.
I believe star bond project district is also a defined term, and if you give me a moment, I'll try and find that. Yes, if you turn to page 9 of the balloon, you will see the definition on line 33 of Starbond Project District.
Okay, so the next clarification would be when there is a pledge for a CID or a TDD revenue, the county and sales taxes are sometimes pledged towards the star bonds to pay them off. And this would clarify that that can be done. It is currently being done on a lot of star bond projects, but it's not really addressed, it's just assumed. So we wanted to clarify that that is the intent of having a CID in a star bond district. We want those funds to go pay off the star bonds first. And Charles, if you explain where that is in the bill.
Chairman, it'll just take me a moment to find that. I'll get back to you. Chairman, if the committee turns to page 24 of the balloon, you can find that language.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so the next clarification is to clarify what I kind of opened with, that the intent is to, the secretary to reduce the boundaries of the current state project area. And we need to be clear that that is doable, because right now we have this big district, and once they choose where they're going to build the stadiums, they'll be able to reduce the boundaries, and this would allow the boundaries to change after the Sarbons have been, after the project has been approved, which it's already been approved. So we need to make sure that we have the ability to shrink that district. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does that language then also give them the ability to increase the size of that?
Revisor Reimer.
Thank you, Chairman. One moment, I need to find that. Does Senator Owens, do you have that?
I don't have it in front of me. I was just going based off of what the chairman had mentioned, specifically referencing the ability to shrink it. I want to see if we have the ability to increase it either.
It's to clarify that it doesn't affect the local pledge.
Chairman, I'm wondering if part of that is on page 13 of the balloon, but there may be additional.
So Revisor Reimer, you're talking about the bottom balloon on page 13.
Yes, I'm wondering if that was what you're referencing. There might be something else as well.
Yeah, so I might have misspoke. It doesn't really give them the ability to change it. It's just that, I mean, they already have that ability in the underlying bill. This just says that if we do, it doesn't affect the locals. Locals had a concern, it's my understanding, that by us drawing a larger district, they would have to also participate, and this clarifies that. Because the intent originally was to allow the locals to draw a much smaller district than the state. And this kind of clears up that so that we're able to do that without having them have to give us all their sales tax. Reason for it is in Wyandotte County, they're building the stadium in a field with no retail. And Wyandotte County has only pledged the retail in that small area. We want to make sure that the construction jobs and the careers that are created, everybody up there will be eating and drinking and staying at hotels. We want the locals to be able to collect all that sales tax, and this would make that abundantly clear. Stand by. Senator Alley.
Mr. Chairman, you're just talking about the area that they had pledged. This is the area for Wyandotte County, for instance, in that area of a bigger area defined by the county, I mean, by the state. You're just, that area is just smaller, and that's where they're pledging their revenue is out of that smaller area.
This makes it, yes, exactly. This makes it clear that they can do that so that they don't have to match ours.
It's not expanding the Star Bonds district after it's already been set.
No, no. Once it's set, it's set. But I mean, the secretary currently has the ability to set it. It hasn't been completely drawn yet. He's already got that authority. This just makes it so that the locals, it's clear they don't have to match.
Chairman.
Supervisor Reimer.
So there may be a couple of other places in the balloon that go to that general concept as well. And one is on page 13, lines 32 there, that reference the establishment or modification of Star Bond project areas. Another change that sort of goes to that is the definition of Star Bond project area, which is expanded a little bit to include or which facilitates the development of one or more projects, which is on page 9. So those are a couple more references which generally address the scope of the area in the district.
Okay. The next clarification is something that makes it clear that locals can modify their pledge after a 60-day period. Because once they make their pledge, this is an ongoing thing. And there is a resolution in Wyandotte County that would have to be changed eventually. And this would give them the authority to do that after the 60-day period that is in the current Star Bond bill. And Charles, can you tell us where that would be? The secretary to proceed after a 60-day period, because 60 days is kind of a short window to make adjustments for a project of this magnitude. I believe it's on page 13, the top balloon.
Yes, Chairman, that is correct.
And there's some clarification that the project area isn't limited to project footprint itself. So like you're building the stadium and some retail in the area of the Star Bond district. This also goes back to something we corrected earlier in defining that the project area is larger than what the building is that's being, the attraction that's being created. Charles?
That would be on page 9 of the balloon, Chairman.
The next clarification is regarding eminent domain. Um, You guys, the Senate added clarifying language. I mean, currently you can't use eminent domain for any economic development program, but we wanted to make sure that it was clear you couldn't use eminent domain. The words eminent domain do appear in old language of the Star Bond bill, and so you added a new section 6, I believe, that kept the locals from, also the locals, not just the state, from using eminent domain for Star Bonds. And this would strike the authority or the power of eminent domain may be exercised. Those words are now stricken because there was another place in the bill that needed to be cleaned up. And Charles, can you tell us where that was?
That would be on page 31 of the balloon, Chairman, and I direct the committee's attention to the new text in lines 12 and 13.
Okay, and the next item is in the Star Bond bill that we made for the stadium or for the Kansas City Chiefs, we had the Finance Council having approval of that project. The next change, when it came through the House made an amendment to have all Star Bond projects approved by the State Finance Council and reviewed. After talking with the Department of Commerce, that's really not necessary. These are mostly local decisions, and none of them are a $4 billion project like we're considering. And so there's no need for the State Finance Council to have to meet every time a Star Bond district's approved, and especially in rural areas with such small limits. So we're removing that provision that the House put in. And can you tell us where that would be, Charles?
I'll have to take a moment to find that. The committee, if the committee would turn to page 15 of the balloon. You'll see the text is stricken on the bottom of page 15, lines 35 down to the bottom.
All right, so one of the other changes that the House made was to take the stated purpose, or make the stated purpose of Star Bond projects to make it clear that these are supposed to be for tourism. Because in the past, we've had some Star Bond districts that, although they have paid for themselves, they mostly cannibalize local sales tax. And the whole intent of the Star Bond project, and we want to maintain this, and we want to keep this tool around for big projects like we're talking about. We put the intent in statute that we wanted 20% of the people to come from out of state, 30% over 100 miles of the customers that come to the attraction. When we did that, it was pointed out that some parts of the state might be different than other parts of the state. If you're in the middle of the state, you may not get, in your rural area, you may not get 20% of your visitors from out of state. And so we wanted to make sure we didn't rule too much out. So we gave a little bit more discretion to the secretary in this change that we're making today, that the secretary has to meet with the project and come up with tourism goals. Then follow up after 5 years to make sure those tourism goals are being met. And if they are not, they need to work with the Starbond project developer and come up with ideas to increase tourism. We figured, since, you build a Starbond district on the border up in Johnson County, you're going to have more than 20% of your visitors from out of town or out of the state. And it kind of was besides the point, really. We want the secretary to be more involved and more involved down the road. Any questions on that? Because that's kind of that's a change. The rest, so far, we've been talking mostly about technical. Senator Alley.
So with that today, 20% from out of state, 30% from more than 100 miles. Do they collect that data today? Have they given us a report to say we are meeting those goals or are we not meeting those goals?
So we had an audit done in legislative post-audit, and they audited, I think, 11 or 12 districts. I think only a small amount of them were actually creating tourism, and that's why we wanted this to be a little bit more involved.
Thank you.
So, all the Starbond districts are, in fact, paying for themselves. Just things like the Speedway are actually accomplishing tourism, and the salt mines was another one that comes to mind. But a lot of these smaller projects that were just using Starbonds to build things, we want to get away from that part. The House side added several reports that ended up being mostly redundant, so we were going to remove those changes because they're already being done. Charles, can you tell us where that is in the bill?
So there's a modification to the report on page 17 where the secretary is to address the visitation issues, if there are any, with developers.
Okay, so Charles, we're talking about the language that would be requiring the city to send separate copies of legal documents, maps, and ordinances after the bond issuances. That's already being sent to the Department of Commerce, and the Department of Commerce is posting them on their website. And we clarified the publicly available information on the website for the feasibility study, the Starbond project plan, and any subsequent modified versions of the information required. So can you tell us where that language is? I'm sorry.
That would be on page 21, Chairman.
Okay, so next up, in the House Committee, Representative Williams brought an amendment that we felt was needed. Currently under the Starbond Act, once your Starbonds are paid off, the original Starbonds are completely paid off. If you pay them off early and say you have 8 years left, if you went through the process locally and got approval and the Secretary of Commerce approved it, you could reissue new Starbonds to expand the project. The new Starbonds could only be used for the 8 years that are left, not any further than that. We didn't have a problem with that, but what Representative Williams' concern was that when you do that, that you go back to the original base. And she felt like, and the committee agreed, that we needed to capture the state's investment at that point, rather than go back and use those funds to build more things for the developer. And so this would allow the state to capitalize on their investment up to that point, and then use the increment to pay for whatever else they were going to do. Senator Owens.
I'll always be a representative in my heart. Be all right. So basically, it's going to allow us to reset what that base is, as I understand it, which I think absolutely makes sense. We've satisfied the intent of the original STAR bonds, allow the state to start recouping some of that investment, if you will, and reset it. It was actually a proviso that was brought up in the budget. And so I can't remember whether that's still in the budget or not, but I agree with that sentiment very much.
Right. Representative Williams brought that proviso as well, and we agreed to put it in the Star Bond bill. It is in the Star Bond bill. It was worded in a way, though, that it might have prohibited the next round of Star Bonds. So when you issue Star Bonds for major projects and you're doing $100 million, you don't issue all your Star Bonds on day one. You issue them as you need them so that you're not paying interest on all that money. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't prohibiting the sale of the current Star Bonds because they do them in series. And so the change that this amendment does just kind of clarifies Representative Williams' intent. Senator Alley.
One question, I think, if I understand right, let's say the project is a three-phase project. You issue project and say go, they build phase one, they won't be selling the bonds for phase two until they get phase one done, basically. So you're saying then they can go ahead and issue the bonds for phase two, phase three, and phase four, provided it was identified in the original Star Bonds district. Phases 2, 3, and 4 will not reset the base.
That is correct. That is correct.
Once the Star Bonds is paid off, in your other scenario you just said, once it's paid off, then you say, oh, by the way, I've got 8 years left. I'd like to build a hotel. That resets the base because it wasn't identified in the original documents. Is that correct?
So normally Star Bonds don't allow vertical construction for a hotel, but yes, if they wanted to change the attraction and add on to it, yes, exactly.
Thank you.
All right, and so then there's an insert that modifies the sports fund statute that we have in our gaming. That, as you know, 75% of those funds were pledged for the maintenance of the stadium, and we wanted to clarify that was one use for the fund. It's an insert, I believe, Charles, is it?
Chairman, the committee can find that after page 34. So it's the next page after page 34.
So when we legalized gaming in Kansas, we established the Attracting Professional Sports Fund. I think that's what it's called. But that fund was 75% of that fund was used for the Kansas City Chiefs, and those funds will be used for the most part for the RMMO fund expenses. And we wanted to clarify that was what we were intended to use the pledged funds for.
Is attachment A in right after page 34.
Senator Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for the revisor, for anyone on staff, where are the attracting professional funds to Kansas currently allocated? And how does this change that, just to super clarify it? Because I know it goes a lot of different places.
She retracts her question. So that's our offer. So yeah, so mostly it's technical cleanup and clarification. There was the change, trying to think. I guess the one change was to allow the Secretary of State to monitor star bond districts going forward and have a little bit more say over how things are done to make them better. We've had a few star bond districts that were identified early, that the tourism wasn't there and we were able to work with them. And we were lucky enough to deal with developers that really wanted to make tourism happen. But we want to make sure that we're going to be able to do that on all star bonds going forward. That was the one big change. Sorry, I did say Secretary of State. I meant Secretary of Commerce. Senator Alley.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Connie confirmed, she set it up. We have this room all day. So we should be good to go.
We're going to need it.
That's exactly right.
Senator Owens.
If it would be all right, Mr. Chairman, we'd like to take maybe 20 minutes to digest this. Would it be possible to recess until 1 o'clock and then reconvene to take this up? We'd like to just spend a little bit more time digesting it.
Absolutely. We'll see you back here at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to reconvene, and we're currently working on Star Bond bill that we put into House Bill 2466. Senator Owens?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I think we're in tentative agreement. We would like for you guys to consider an additional amendment to the Star Bond bill. If I could get that amendment handed out, what this specifically refers to, it's generally understood, as we were talking about, that that this is all about tourism and attracting people from out of states. And I think that it's pretty clear that amusement parks are an allowable use for Star Bonds, but we have an amendment just to clarify that language, that amusement parks is an acceptable use of Star Bonds. So if we could get that handed out for your consideration. So what you'll see on there is, again, front page, it just amends the title, just to include major amusement park areas. And then on the third page there, at the top, it says page 12, goes on to define what an amusement ride is, and also, some of the clarifications on what is included for a major amusement park area to be eligible for the Star Bonds.
I have a question for the revisor. And, either one of you can answer. Was amusement park area not in the Star Bond bill? Was that a proviso that we did in the past?
Yes, it was.
And how does this differ from that proviso?
There are three changes to the language that's appeared in the budget bills the last few years. The first is that the term used would be major amusement projects instead of parks. These projects would now include related themed hotels and restaurants. And the term amusement ride would be changed to also include attractions that allow for visitors to enjoy an interactive experience with licensed intellectual property. Such attractions shall be at least 25,000 square feet and have the capacity to draw over 100,000 people per year. Those are the changes.
Okay, so the 100,000 people a year, does that supersede the underlying bill that calls for 30% of the people to come from 100 miles or more away, according to the Secretary of Commerce?
It would likely be an additional requirement on top of that.
Okay. And as a follow-up question, you said restaurants and hotels. Would this allow Star Bonds to be used to build restaurants and hotels vertically?
Likely, yes. The existing language from the proviso had included in the definition of amusement ride, buildings necessary to house and operate such amusement park rides, buildings immediately adjacent and attached to such amusement park rides, and a building necessary to house a conference center within the amusement park area. And then again, the change regarding themed restaurants and hotels is being added to that in the definition of major amusement project. So I believe, yes, that it would include vertical construction.
And that was your intent, Senator?
I believe that is the intent. Again, it's all tied back to the major amusement project that meets all of these additional requirements, as well as the other thing that really is expanded is interactive experiences. As we know at these major amusement parks now, it's not necessarily something where you get on a roller coaster, right? Amusement rides have been very much expanded to be interactive experiences. So those are a couple of the primary changes.
You have any questions? Do you have any questions? Can you stand by? I'm going to have to get back to you on that, on this amendment. I know that this amendment was proposed to the speaker at one point, and he was adamantly against vertical construction of hotels of any kind. And I want to make sure that I'm not going against his wishes on this. So we'll table this for now to the next recess, and then we'll get back on that. But are there any other changes that you want to consider?
Mr. Chairman, the other change that I would like to consider, and I think it's prudent because we're making a lot of these changes to the star bonds, and that would be to include the contents of 2793 and just merge this into the Sports Authority as well as the star bonds all in one bill. Since most of these changes in the star bonds are being attributed to the stadium project, I think that it makes sense just to, like I said, add the contents of 2793 into 2466 as well. And I believe that there will be a few amendments that'll need to be offered on that bill as well. But I think working these together as one big package would make a lot of sense. So you might consider that as well.
We can agree to that. We can agree to that.
Okay.
Do you have any amendments to the?
I do have just, I know of two amendments that need to be brought that I did not have a chance to be written out. That again, since I know Chairman Alley has a couple of amendments that aren't quite ready yet. The two that I have specifically that I would like for you guys to also consider while we're at it. Let me go back to my notes here. In what is currently 2793, again, we're in agreement to move the Sports Authority into 2466. In 2793, at the respect of Senate Vice President Schallenberger, he would like to remove Section 5J, which is on currently on page 9, lines 20 and 28. What that has to do, as well as remove K4. Both of those have to do with the Sport Authority's ability to borrow. He has real concerns that we already have the KDFA involved. They're the ones that have the authority to borrow, that by giving the Sports Authority that authority, he has concerns about that, and asked that I ask you to consider an amendment to remove those two areas as well. So if you would consider that.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you. Could you repeat that, please, while I write it down? Thank you.
Certainly. In what is currently 2793, the Sports Authority, the request is to remove section 5J on page 9, lines 20 to 28. And then also remove K4, which has to do with the borrowing through the issuance of bonds. I don't have the page for K4. I apologize for that.
Supervisor Reimer, can you help?
That would be page 10.
So we've gotten a lot of questions on that borrowing authority, and the intent was not to allow the Sports Authority to issue star bonds for sure. And we were under the understanding that they could not. But in order to clear up that consternation, I don't have a problem removing those. I mean, if for some reason down the road they need to borrow money, they should come back to the legislature to talk about it.
Okay, so it sounds like we're in agreement then, and correct me if I'm wrong, to add 2793, the Sports Authority bill, into 2466, and then also to remove those two sections that have been requested. And then you will consider our amusement park amendment, and then we'll finalize agreement on the big amendment. Is that correct? We're on the same page?
That is. Can you give me 30 minutes or so to track down the speaker, or do you have to be?
We have caucus at 1:30, and we're back on the floor at 2. So maybe we could recess until the recess of the second chamber, whatever that wording is. Whenever you're done and we're done, are you guys going back on the floor at 2?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so we've got caucus at 1:30, then we'll be on the floor at 2. So whenever we're both done from our 2 o'clock session, we can meet back here. Does that work?
Yes. So we'll table this conversation.
Sounds good.
If it's okay with you, I want to reopen one that we've talked about already.
Okay.
So after we went through the changes that we made to the Airbnb bill, 2481, I'm bringing that back up, right? So it was brought to our attention that currently, under current law, Airbnbs, if they have more than one bedroom, like 2 or more, that they do collect transient guest tax. And it was the House bill changed that to more than 2. You guys changed it back to 1, so it wasn't an issue for the interested parties. But it's come to my attention that most of the Airbnbs that are being rented are 2 bedrooms, and that would be a big blow to the transient guest tax for tourism. And so, with your permission, we would like to go just to original language that was in the underlying bill before we started all of this to, on that portion, 2 or more. The underlying statute, right? The underlying, yeah, the original statute on both. So Amelia, we're at more than 2 at one port, and then 2 or more on the other.
Okay, so let me clarify with respect to House Bill 2481 as amended by Senate Committee. Going back to this, we are looking, there's no changes to new section 1, which has to do with the summer time. There's no change to the transient guest provisions in line 32 or 30 through 34 on page 2. Those would remain. But what we're talking about is the definition of hotel, motel, tourist court, and the definition of accommodations broker in 121692 and 121696. There will be no changes as compared to current law or current statute. Those provisions would not, they will be the original language of the statute. No changes.
Right.
And just to clarify that, because of that, I believe what's currently Section 3, the 121696, I believe those may be the only those were the only amendments that were being made in this provision, so it may be a complete strike of that section just because there would be no changes to that statute. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's the intent. So the rural communities especially deal with a lot of Airbnb transient guest tax, and we didn't want to interrupt that. Okay, so that'll be the new agreement. Do you have a minute or one more, Bill? Or okay. House Bill 2700 had to do with the Right to Repair Act. And there was an amendment made on the Senate side about toys. You want to explain that?
Well, Hallmark came up. If you look throughout the entire Right to Repair Act bill, you'll see that it excludes an awful lot of things because this was really meant to be specifically tailored to the digital right to repair and trying to get ahead of that topic. The amendment that was added excluded toys, but once we added that exclusion amongst all the other ones, there was concern that maybe it didn't fit correctly where we had it placed. And so I believe that's the amendment that has been prepared, is just to take what's already there and just move it to a different section of the bill. Am I understanding that amendment correctly?
You have that amendment to pass out? Okay. Okay, and this clears that up.
Yes, this amendment, and certainly welcome to have the reviser review this, but you can see where it strikes on page 2 and then moves that same language down to towards the bottom of, well, what is titled as page 7 on the bill. It doesn't change anything. It's all technical in nature. It just cleans the bill up.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. Yeah, so I was, for the record, I was prepared to concur to your changes. Then it was brought to my attention that we needed a technical cleanup, and that's what this is. So we will agree to that.
Sounds great. Well, then I think we're good on 2700, and we kick that one out as well.
And then we'll recess until the break of the second chamber at the 2 o'clock session. Thank you.